Thanks, Aiden, and thank you for the introduction so we can jump right on in to the discussion. Now we're going to focus on the conversation where the rubber hits the road. But I never miss an opportunity to take the prerogative that I have as the facilitator of this discussion to follow up on a couple of points I heard from the previous session. The first point I want to make is let's not pretend this issue around hiring and advancing individuals with criminal records is separate and apart from the issues around skills-based hiring as one example. This is part of a larger ecosystem of change that we're trying to create. And secondly, while we have 46 members of the Second Chance Business Coalition, and we're always attempting to grow that, Verizon is one example. You're going to hear from 3 other individuals who are members of the Second Chance Business Coalition. But there really is, at least among our members at the BRT, a groundswell of companies who want to open the aperture of hiring, who want to and who are opening the aperture to hiring the population of individuals that we're here to talk about today. And what better opportunity do we have than to hear from the people who actually create, sometimes they eliminate, policies and practices that actually are going to enable us to reach the goals that they've set for hiring individuals that are not just in response to filling the vast number of jobs that they have open, but to creating more opportunity for more individuals. And I want to start with you, Michelle Kuranty, who again is the Executive Director of the New Joiner Experience. We all talk about JPMorgan Chase and the 10% hires over the past 3 years. Each year, 10% of your new hires have been individuals with criminal records. Like, that didn't happen quickly. Talk a little bit about what that looks like. How did you get there? And what are the types of jobs that individuals are getting hired to take advantage of at the company? And in addition to the hiring, Michelle, retention. I think retention's a huge issue that we often gloss over. So what is it that you've done around recruitment and retention?
Recruitment and retention is 2 things. First off, from a hiring standpoint, in 2018, we banned the box to eliminate the question on our applications, and then did some internal work looking at our policies and practices, and then announced in the fall of 2019 a formal Second Chance initiative and effort that we have underway, which is a multi-pronged approach. One is our Policy Institute and our Policy Center, along with the work with the Second Chance Business Coalition that drives policy and work around there. Secondly is obviously with hiring and eliminating the box, so to speak, it's also looking at our hiring practices once someone does receive a contingent offer and the individualized job screening process that we are doing to make sure that people are fit for the jobs from a safety and security standpoint. But then also we did also launch at that time a community-based hiring model to work directly with community partners and workforce partners and legal partners in the communities to do the left of application support to make sure that they had skill training, but also were aware so that when they could apply to an organization like ours that can be pretty big, some of that is demystified, that they know what to expect, when to expect it, and that they're able to focus on their skills and what they bring to the table to the jobs. So those are the main things that we have done to get there.
Yeah, let me, Erich, I'm going to come to you, the Chief Human Resource Officer, and so I don't have to say that over and over, CHRO of Schnitzer Steel. Maybe a quick study on who is Schnitzer Steel, what do you do, and what's the work that you've done around hiring individuals with criminal records? In particular, I'm really most interested in the results.
Got it. So Schnitzer Steel, we are a metals recycling organization. We're mid-sized, nowhere close to Michelle's organization. We have about 3,500 employees. We operate in 33 different states and the 2 western provinces. And what we do is we recycle end-of-life metal. So refrigerators, vehicles, et cetera. And our focus really around why we've built a second chance program, really centered around the challenges that we face as an organization, being industrial, being physical labor. It's been very challenging for us to attract talent into our organization. We've utilized the traditional recruiting methods of job boards, partnerships with organizations like the military, and it just hasn't been enough. So what we did, starting back similar to Michelle, back in 2015, we banned the box as part of our application process, but we really steered our focus around second chance, recognizing and appreciating that over a quarter of adult Americans have a background. And we were missing the opportunity to attract that talent into our organization.
Yeah, Eric, I want to follow up because one of the things we hear from our member companies on skills-based hiring is really around the training of the people who hire. And how do you overcome, what have you done to overcome some of the cultural issues, the attitudes for those people who actually sign off before they make the recommendation to you?
No, great question. And for us, it started with our chairman and CEO, Tamer Lundgren. She is our champion around second chance and any and every opportunity to pursue talent and bring it into our organization. That was quickly followed by our board and their engagement in the program itself. It's something that starting in 2021, they've asked me on a quarterly basis to brief them on our successes, our challenges, and the activities that we were pursuing. Coupled with that, though, we operate in large parts of the country, the Bay Area, in Tacoma, for example, but we also operate in very small remote locations. So a lot of our focus was around leveraging our leadership, who oftentimes grew up in those smaller communities and had strong credibility with state and community leadership. And we leveraged them to have that engagement when opportunities to open doors and visit with the leadership in the communities. But probably more importantly and more transformational for us has been our internal communications, Dane. What we do is we highlight our second chance hires. We highlight all of our hires and all of our success stories, if you will, on a quarterly basis. We have all employee town hall calls with our chairman and CEO, and she highlights successes. We also offer CEO office hours calls on a monthly basis where we engage with a small group of around 25 of our employees, and they come from all diversities, all backgrounds, and it affords them the opportunity and exposure with our CEO and to learn more about their challenges and how we can break down the barriers that they've experienced in the past to make sure that they don't become new barriers for us going forward.
Yeah, implicit in your response, and that I picked up on was, we're not here, it's around geography, and that we're not talking just about this issue in relationship to Chicago, New York City, Atlanta. I mean, we're talking about those tier 2, maybe not even tier 3 cities, those rural locations that Damien mentioned moments ago. And so I think it's really an attempt to create, again, this groundswell of providing opportunity regardless of location, and particularly in an environment where you can do a lot of remote working in some of the member companies, at least through BRT and the Second Chance Coalition, that we want to provide those opportunities regardless of where you live. Hoai Scott, Senior Vice President of HR with NBCUniversal, what a powerful PSA that we saw in the opening. And you guys do just a great job of storytelling. And I want to hear about not just the storytelling you do to change hearts and minds, but the involvement in the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. And how does the participation in that coalition helping drive the type of change that we're all here to talk about today?
Thank you. Yes, we started our relationship with, can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? Yeah,
Yes.
okay. We started our relationship with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition in 2018 when our CEO learned about second chance hiring. And he learned about all the great data around hireability, promotability, all the barriers that exist. And so in 2018, actually before the social reckoning, we actually started providing employment opportunities for our returning citizens. And it wasn't really until after the social reckoning that we started leaning into our other skills as well. And so what we are a film company. So I work for Universal Pictures. And so Hollywood has been known to be the informal ministry of propaganda. And so we put stories in the world and we put narratives in the world. And sometimes they include harmful stereotypes, right, that perpetuate images of danger, inferiority, guilt. And so we really felt like we had a responsibility to be part of the change. And if people don't learn something different, they just stick with what they know. And so we really felt like, we needed to lean into our superpower of changing narratives. And so we partnered with the ARC to not only provide employment opportunities, but really think about how could we change the broader societal narrative.
And talk to me a little bit about, as a result of changing the narrative, what are some examples you'd point to where you've seen actual change happen as a result of that narrative?
I would say, in general, because there is the stigma of formerly incarcerated people, that when we started doing this work, people wondered, are we putting our employees at risk? Is it dangerous, right, for our staff? And what we did was we really got to know the ARC and their members and really understood the benefits, as well as how do we connect people with each other so that the narrative changes, right? And so we've had people join our organization, and that human connection of learning stories and barriers, and really everybody who has been a part of our partnership has been changed by the experience. And it could be anything from an intern that has imagined new possibilities for him or herself that was never imagined before, or the intern that finishes college and sponsors and inspires the people in his community to go to school. We have an intern that is now a full-time employee, and he is actually a speaker for the Human Rights Watch. And he goes back to prisons, and he talks about how you can be released, and after 25 years, and he provides hope, right? He talks about employers that believe in second chances, and he provides hope in a place where usually there isn't any. And I think we know that hope saves lives. And so there are a few examples of people, really the kind of that ripple effect of people changing and then changing the people around them. And with the PSA, we're trying to get the broadest reach possible with regard to changing the narrative, but really the human-to-human contact also is part of the change.
Great. So I'm not going to pick, really, this question is not targeting attorneys, but I do want to open the floor here, maybe start with you, Michelle. You're a heavily regulated industry.
Very.
There are some things you can and cannot do.
Correct.
When it comes to hiring people. But talk to me more about the solutions you created to hire individuals with records as you worked with your legal counsel. Like, what are the barriers you had to overcome, and what was real versus what was a myth?
So I think, first of all, for anybody who hasn't heard about Jamie Dimon, this all started with a human, right? He actually came into Chicago one time, spent some time with one of our workforce partners and our philanthropy partners, and met with some individuals, and they told their stories, right? And the biggest thing he kept hearing was they want jobs, they want an opportunity. And so now it's been part of his shareholders, and it's part of, it's the human side of what we do. And what was interesting is when you have someone like Jamie come back and say, figure it out, it does break down some barriers, right? Like, so CEOs can do that. But it really was looking at what can we do, both from an internal standpoint and what are we comfortable with, and just in terms of really looking at the individual cases at hand where there is not a matter of law. But then importantly, that has also driven a lot of our government work in terms of policy, really looking at FDIC, which is something that does put up barriers in terms of what we can and cannot hire for many of our employees. In fact, all of them, so here in the United States. And so that has allowed us to really have those conversations with them. We've seen certain changes in the FDIC Section 19 requirements, not to get technical and lawyerish there, that also resulted in the Fair Chance Hiring Banking Act. I think I got it wrong, but that was passed in December. That really looks at removing some of the legal barriers. There's also clean slate legislation. Another interesting part is, again, going back to the groundswell that starts to happen as an employer, our legal group really heard about some of our work. They do volunteer pro bono work. They've actually taken up, along with our community managers and many of our community branches, expungement clinics, where they're truly helping individuals to remove some of their own barriers by eligibility of expungements. And so again, how we're coming as a full force of the firm to lift up individuals, lift up our communities, but also create great talent pipelines for us.
Eric, any barriers that you encountered with legal counsel?
No, not at all. I'm glad to work where I work instead of JPMorgan with you, Michelle. No, actually, internally, there really were no barriers. We were a little risk averse initially, Dane, as part of our background check review process. But starting in 2020, we set that aside, and we've had a tremendous success. Similar to Michelle, 10% of our hires over the last 3 years are those with a felony background. But probably the most transformational result for us has really been on the retention side. We operate in a very volatile a lot of our competition is retail, so we have high turnover, and we range in the 70 to 80% in segments of our business. But those with a second chance that we've hired, we're having retention of 50%. So, I mean, that goes a long ways, both externally, but probably more importantly, internally for us.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that, because this is a data point we hear over and over, that the retention rate for individuals with criminal records is much higher than the average population that work for companies. One of the things, Hoai, one of the things we've learned is that companies are hiring earlier and earlier. And that population is coming through internship, work-based learning opportunities. So I know you're part of the ARC program. I would love to hear a little bit more about that. And how does that program actually give individuals with records, put them on equal footing, if you will, getting in the door early, just as much as the individuals without records?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we ask the ARC to fully vet people that they think will be successful in our organization. So we feel very comfortable that they come to us committed to being drug-free, violence-free, and really committed to being successful in the corporate work world. And so what we do is we try to set them up with every chance for success, right? Because it's really not about just giving people the opportunity. It is really helping our leaders own their success. So that what that means is making sure that our leaders are interviewing people in the right way, right? When we think about how do you interview and you have somebody who has a background that's different, right? And do you ask questions about their background that may be too invasive? And so what we did was we looked for supervisors that are willing to take a growth mindset with regard to this work and really be able to learn from their mistakes. This is new for so many people. And so we wanted people to understand they would make mistakes, and that's okay. We wanted leaders to provide the flexibility that people need. Maybe they have court dates or volunteer opportunities that they needed to go to, or they need to go to school. And so leaders had to have that level of flexibility. And we also talked about what's the right language to use, right? Let's make sure we don't use dehumanizing language. And oftentimes when we talk about formerly incarcerated people, we say ex-con or felon, criminal, inmate, right? An inmate is a very demoralizing word for formerly incarcerated people. And so we taught our leaders the right words to use to have a growth mindset. From every session of internship, we learned from it. So we did a postmortem afterwards, and we learned. And so we had learned that one of our candidates, had experienced an interview that was too invasive. And so we trained our leaders on making sure that you ask job-relevant questions, right, that you're having an inclusive interview. We don't want to force anybody or anyone to feel compelled to tell their story if they're uncomfortable, because sometimes the retelling of stories is traumatizing, right? And we even looked at, for example, there was an intern that during his internship process, in our average conversation, we might say, take a stab at it, give it a shot, right? And he said he felt unwelcome because of that language. And so we don't really think about kind of the average language that you use and how that can also make someone feel unwelcome. And so all those things taught us lessons. And then what we did was we trained our leaders, we created toolkits, and we trained our leaders on how to do this, right? How to own the development and the success of your interns so that it's much more than just giving somebody, one chance. It's owning their success and owning their development.
Yeah, what do you do to prevent, I call it the backsliding? You do all the training, but sometimes people go back to their old behaviors.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about how, what does the regular training look like so that you can actually not just maintain, but advance?
Yeah. Well, we make ourselves available. And so we say, this is going to be hard. This is going to be uncomfortable. You're going to make mistakes. You might step back, but we are here, right? We are here to be a part of your journey. And we really, as HR people, as employment law, as our talent acquisitions team, we make ourselves available for when people are starting to feel uncomfortable. And it's really in that discomfort, right, where you get the growth.
Great. Erich and Michelle, where do work-based learning opportunities, where do internships or registered apprenticeships, or if not registered, an apprenticeship, how does that fit into the bank of solutions that you're implementing at your companies?
Want to go first?
He said the word bank, so I figured it
Okay,
would be
well,
kind of your space.
first of all, it's every job and every entry point into an organization is an opportunity for someone with criminal backgrounds, especially when you ban the box. And hiring managers and recruiters, we actually have a very unique approach in that they never find out that somebody had a criminal background. So it is in a contained group so that the employee is not having, if they come on board, having to explain themselves or have that follow them in that regard. So they are coming in through internships. They are coming through apprenticeships. And they are coming through regular employees at every level of our organization. I think there is a misnomer that people with a criminal background is always at a certain stage. Guess what? When you have 70 million Americans with a criminal background, they're at different stages in their careers. They're at different stages of their lives, different stages of their skill profiles. And they have to have the ability to have the opportunity to come in where they're at. So yes, they come in through those things, but we don't have a designated second chance program per se where people are entering into because we did find that we didn't want to call that out for individuals. We wanted them to have entry points of where they're at.
Yeah, and before you jump in here, Erich, I asked this question too because, again, this is about second chance employment. It's about, for us at BRT at least, the apprenticeship accelerator. It's about skills-based hiring. It's about solid lines, not even dotted lines to all of these different components, which I think are critical to building the ecosystem that we're all after. But Erich, on the question?
Yeah, and we leverage apprenticeships on a fairly small scale, but in regards to skills-based, probably 98% of our jobs are skills-based focused. We have no academic requirements except for limited roles within our finance organization. So we cast a very broad net. We don't have limitations as it relates to segments of the population. But what we do once we get them into our organization is something that we believe is much more transformational. Is we have a curriculum of over 300 courses in multi-languages that touch all the basic foundational elements of learning, from reading, writing, the technologies, teams, all the technologies that come to us these days. And I would say we introduced that in May of 22, and we've had over 2,000 of those courses taken by our employees. And that's both second chance employees as well as our entire workforce. The thing that I will thank you, not that this is a promo for BRT, but thank you for the connection to McDonald's last year. What we also did in the latter part of 22 is introduced a financially funded in full high school diploma program. And that has been extremely well received. Of our 5 recipients that are going through the program right now, each of them are second chance hires.
Yeah, I think what's so interesting, and would love to hear a little bit more, Erich, to this, I'm going to call it a learning portal. Like, how do you not solely depend on a third party, whether it's a nonprofit organization or higher education? How has Schnitzer Steel taken responsibility for saying, we have people who need to beef up their skills. They may be foundational reading skills, but talk to us about what that looks like. How did you go about developing that? And who did you work with to do it? Because I think many companies are trying to figure out how do they create that learning anywhere, anytime, any place can happen and through the materials that you develop?
Yeah. Well, actually, what we did is we kind of came at it from the bottom up. We actually went to all of our employees. We surveyed, we had focus groups, we had one-on-one sessions with our workforce to talk about what are the things that you would like to pursue, that you feel are limiting your ability to grow both within our organization and just personally. And so we took that and we cobbled that together and partnered with an organization called DDI to establish a curriculum of those over 300 courses that are done in classroom, they're done virtually, they can be done on their mobile device. And that's the partnership that we established based upon what we heard from our workforce.
Great. Let's focus a little bit on advancement. It's not just getting people hired. It's about showing them a path to upward mobility, developing more skills for better jobs with better pay. Who wants to take that one first? What does that look like for you? Hoai?
Sure, I'm happy to. Yeah, we create career pathways, right? So we bring them in as interns, but we don't hire people just for the job that they're being hired into. And what we're looking to do really is create a culture of feedback. And so we think about feedback actually an act of equity and an act of justice, because a lot of times we have first generation people, first time college in their family, first time corporate job. And what we look to our leaders to do is to really let them know how to advance their skills. So they're owning the development, the skills of their people. And so we really look at what are the ways? How do you, as a leader, take ownership? How do you understand, have the conversation to understand what the person's ambitions are? And we had somebody actually join as an intern in a marketing department. And after the internship, he was hired on as an apprentice editor. And then now he's an assistant editor in a marketing department of a movie company. And it's a very coveted and valued job. And it really was merit-based, right? We set the person up to succeed, but really it was the development of the skills in order for the person to continue to advance. And we hire people in production, IT, in film tech, in HR, in marketing. And it really is for the purpose of career pathways, that they're jobs that were really where they can advance in their careers and not just entry-level jobs.
Michelle?
So I can try to do that. Obviously, we're a big company. And one of the things that you find is, and I've seen this in my own career, being there about 26 years, is it's like a little bit of an amoeba, right? So we hire individuals in. Yes, we have career journeys. Yes, we have the education benefits for individuals that are 100% paid for. Yes, we have all of those opportunities. But people's lives and interests and those kind of things change as they kind of go through their careers. And so I think it is critical to have a culture of internal mobility, the support mechanisms to be able to do that, things like the business resources groups and other channels to help lift individuals up so that people can go from technology into, I don't know, product or into HR, other areas of the bank. And I think, yes, there's career journeys. Yes, there's journey maps around things. But I think one of the beauties of having an organization like ours and some of the sets that we've done in terms of upskilling and job reskilling and some of those types of works is that people are able to look at a menu and without changing a 401k, build a career that can go in different ways for themselves.
Erich?
Indeed, we do have career paths as well for most of our first line positions. But what we do is we also have on top of that, we've built a level up program. So for each of those roles within that path, they've got defined periods of time in which the skill set should be achieved. And we evaluate the progress against that timeline with the employee. And when there appears to be a gap, then there's the partnership directly with the employee and the manager to create development plans. And that's where we then steer back to that learning journey that we talked about earlier with all those courses to help them accelerate their progression in both their existing role and their progress forward.
So the CEO tells you to jump, and you ask how high, or maybe you don't ask, you just jump, jump, jump. How does this work not become the sole responsibility of HR? And what does it look like at each of your companies? And who's involved in developing and implementing this strategy so that it just doesn't fall on the CHRO or someone in talent acquisition? to get this right, and not just get it right, but to be successful?
Well, I'll go real quick. For us, it is a partnership with all of our leaders. We've got within our organization of 3,500, over 500 leaders, and they own the hiring process. They own the development of their workforce. So it's not just a responsibility of one or our CEO to have those conversations quarterly or monthly, like I described earlier. It really resonates and sits with each of our respective sites and the leadership at our sites from a hiring and development perspective. And they've embraced it without barrier and without burden.
Yeah. Hoai?
Yeah, I'll add to that. People have been asking now that you're potentially moving into a recession, budgets are being cut, how do you continue the DEI work, the momentum on it? And really what we say is that authentic DEI is done through our leaders and our employees. And so we embed the DEI work in our culture, and so it is owned by every employee, every leader, and they move the work forward. It is done through our team.
No small
Yeah.
company.
I think it's at every level and every organization, obviously from the frontline managers to the business leaders. We do have, what's been interesting about this work, it is a hugely cross-collaboration group, which has allowed me to get to know some great people across the firm that I might not have otherwise, whether it be in our corporate responsibility organization, to our legal group, to our global workforce screening group, to talent, obviously our talent acquisition group, but a lot of our business leaders, right? A lot of our business leaders, they show up, right? They're spending time with our workforce partners to explain what their roles are and with the career paths and the skill journeys they have, as well as what training are they working on post that. So it is something that is across the organization. And you even see it now with our, Damien mentioned, middle market companies. Right now you see it because, again, we're sending out a demand signal. We're showing how we can do it and stand up. And a lot of our organizations that we support from a middle market or small business companies, right, it's another resource for them to help them in terms of their thinking about their labor strategies and our human capital strategies. And so I think that's been a big part of that, and seeing our leaders even in those organizations talk to it with their clients and customers who are also out there dealing with human capital issues. So it's not just an HR thing. In fact, we just play one part, and the rest of the company plays their part.
This work's like never ending. Like it's never, there are some assignments we all get, you like check, you move on to the next item, but this is about continuous improvement.
Mhm.
What are you optimistic about? And maybe a different spin on the question I was going to ask, like, what's not going as well as you thought? And how'd you fix it?
I would say for us, we started this journey back in 2015, and it was extremely slow and frustrating. Fast forward, we reached 2020, and being a part of this coalition has catapulted us forward to the success and the highlights that I mentioned earlier with regards to our hiring. Had it not been for leveraging the insight and the size of the organizations that are part of the coalition, I'm highly confident that we would have still been at a very slow pace of success. So for us, it's really been about the partnership.
And the CEO.
Well, she helps.
Yeah, I
Others?
would say what I'm optimistic about is that employees have really reevaluated what they expect from their workplace,
Mhm.
and they want to know that their workplace is allowing them to bring their full talents and experiences to work, to do meaningful work with other people. And that's worked to our benefit because we do embed DEI in our culture. And I'll give one example of, when we embarked upon this after the social reckoning, we had employees come forward and said, what can I do? What's my part?
Mm.
And we had one employee is the head of stage plays. And he said to me, I'm really interested in getting involved. And so what I do is I kind of keep that information in my back pocket and think about, okay, how can I leverage this person? And so the ARC came to me at one point and said, we want to do a stage play that centers the stories of women. And I said, oh, have you ever done a play before? And they're like, no, but we're going to do it. And I said, okay, great. So let me, connect you to our head of stage plays. And so I went to him and I said, hey, do you remember when you asked what you could do, I have an opportunity for you to leverage the skills that you already have to contribute to this work with the ARC. And I told him about it, and he said, it would be my honor to do this work. And so I really believe that people want to do things that are meaningful, that adds to the broader society, and these opportunities make people feel like our DEI work is authentic.
Michelle?
So I'll talk about, again, the real life stories being in talent acquisition and new joiner experience. When we first started this work, it was not easy. In fact, there was many times that I was like, okay, is this really one of those things, right? The first couple of months of doing this and really understanding FDIC and the regulations and all of those interfaces to doing that and having some conversations around that. When you do see things that you can really use as examples when our policy institute is doing things like white papers or having those conversations. But what's also been very interesting is that during the pandemic, it became critical for us because all of a sudden, courts house were closed. People couldn't get documentations, like all of those kind of things happening. But we actually looked at it as an opportunity for us to work with our community partners who were able to help people get things that they maybe didn't have access to or learn how to do Zoom. And we were able to hire a lot of individuals from that. One thing that has not worked well sometimes has been, okay, you can't be dependent on one job. That's why I talk about entry points. And so really looking at what are the skills that our community partners are building and what are the different jobs and roles that people come into so that you're not dependent on the demand of one job, but that you are looking at what their entry point into the organization. I think that's been a big learning for us.
I think this is a great point. It's such an important point, and it's where we see a lot of activity among our members, at least, is how do you build the bank of skills for an individual? How does that individual develop those skills with the help of their employers, but not see the acquisition of those skills as linear? Mm-hmm. That there are a lot of different ways, like a spider web, you can go to apply those skills. You may be in computer science, but you may end up doing something completely different based on aspirations, quite frankly. So I think particularly in this economy where agility is so important to be successful, we're here with big companies, and we have a lot of viewers online in addition to those who are here with us today. But even big companies call the Second Chance Business Coalition and they ask, where the heck do I start? Mm-hmm. They just don't know. What's your advice?
Oh, wow. My advice would be doing what they're doing, which is calling the Business Coalition. And again, the
right
group,
answer.
I mean, not you, Dane, but the rest of the groups. But in all seriousness, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, this coalition, the BRT, the opportunity to engage and hear from others and their experiences has been transformational for us. So reaching out, would be my advice.
Great, thanks, Eric.
Mm-hmm.
Hoai?
Yeah, I would say the first thing to do is educate yourself on the barriers to entry. And we're part of SCBC, and so we have a toolkit for that, a social justice toolkit. Yeah. And so we're happy to share it. And I think that education is the foundation for compassion, which is understanding people's suffering and doing your part to alleviate it. And so the education part, I think, is key. In order to care, open your hearts about this group of people who really are severely impacted by systemic racism, right? And so I think that's why we have to do our part is people are born into a script that they have no control over, right? The color of your skin, the community you're born into, the parents that you had, right? Were you abandoned so you felt safer on the streets and you joined a gang, landed in prison, right? Where you're brutalized and traumatized. And then when you are ready for release, you're stigmatized, right? And why have we been accepting of this, right? It's a narrative of dehumanization. And so I think we can't accept that any longer. So I think educate yourself on the barriers and understand people suffering and why it's important. And then I would say, think about what is your superpower as a company, right? And use that superpower, right? We're a film company, we tell stories. That's why we leaned into this part of the work.
Great. Michelle, you get the last word.
I think it's the first and foremost is always just talk to people. People telling their own stories and what they bring to an organization will always forever change, right? Like, so seek to understand what people have to bring to the table and not how to eliminate, but how to include.
Thank you, the three of you. These are three great examples of what companies are doing to open the aperture to individuals with criminal records. Many more, I think you'll hear on the remainder of the agenda about what other companies are doing, but please join me in thanking the panel.
Thank you, Dane.